Next on Sunday Square Off, Jeff Flake's earthquake.
I am announcing today that my service in the Senate will conclude at the end of my term in early January 2019. To be conservative, you have to be angry, and it's a different type of politics than we're used to.
His poll numbers are terrible. He's done terribly for the great people of Arizona.
I have seen Jeff Flake stand up for what he believes in, knowing full well that there would be a political price to pay.
All that and more right now on Sunday Square Off.
And good morning and welcome to Sunday Square Off. I'm Bram Resnick. Arizona Senator Jeff Flake triggered a political earthquake last week here in Arizona and in the nation's capital with a stunning speech announcing he won't run for re-election next year. On today's show, was it pure politics or a crisis of conscience that led Flake to abandon the Senate? What Flake's bailout means for his primary opponent, Republican Kelly Ward, and Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, who's waiting in the wings. Then later, why was Michelle Reagan, the state's top elections official, out of touch as her office botched an election? And would President Trump's tax plan really give you a $4,000 raise? We have the answer. But first, joining us for our left-right debate this morning, Chad Campbell, former Democratic Minority Leader in the Arizona House of Representatives, now a political consultant at Strategies 360, and Barrett Marson, political and PR consultant at Marson Media. Good to see you both. Let's get our disclosures out of the way. Do either of you represent anybody, connections to anybody we're going to be talking about this morning in the Senate field?
No.
Nope. No. Good news. All right. Let's get that taken care of. So Jeff Flake called on fellow senators and Americans to stand up to Donald Trump, and here he is bailing out, leaving the Senate. A lot of folks are asking, if that's what you believe, why not just stand and fight? Chad?
Well, I think that he's going to fight for the next year is my guess. And I will say, you know, as a former elected official, the toll it takes on you personally sometimes is very difficult. And so I don't want to judge him right or wrong. I do think it's interesting that he said a lot of things that went after Trump and Trumpism, as many people call it now, and then to your point is bailing out. But he does have a year left to fight. I think part of it was a political calculation now. He was going to have a very tough primary, as we know, and probably a very tough general election, as we also know. So I think he figures, I'm going to give it my all this next year, fight for what I believe is true conservatism, and then leave somewhat unwounded and unscathed, probably.
And politics, is that politicians generally run or don't run based on what the polls tell them, right?
Yeah, but in this case, I think it's a little bit of both. I do think he believes in what he's saying truly, and I think people have to look at what he said and stop focusing on his retirement so much as what he said. But I think it was part politics, too. He had a very tough election ahead of him.
Barrett.
Well, you know, Bram, as you well know, I was on this show.
Here we go.
March 12th. And I wanted to predict then that Jeff Flake wouldn't run, and you talked me out of it, much to my chagrin now. So I would have looked like a genius. And it's rare.
And that's first time for everything.
Rare
right?
that I look like a genius, much less am a genius. So, but the reason I had deduced back then, it was still alive today. He hates the fight. Jeff Flake is a nice guy. Jeff Flake doesn't want to get in the mud. Jeff Flake doesn't like this anger, this fighting that is going on right now. Remember, Jeff Flake is voting with Trump 96% of the time or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Policy-wise, he's a very conservative guy. He's going to vote for tax cuts. He's incredibly conservative. It's all about style and tone, and this is not the kind of style and tone that Jeff Flake likes.
I agree.
Now, I want to focus on the voters because I think they get lost. We focus on the politicians, but this is really all about the voters. Arizona Republican primary voters, the so-called base, have never really liked Jeff Flake.
Nope.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. Yet he crushed Will Cardin back in 2012.
Late Will Cardin, that was
absolutely. But he crushed, and then Will Cardin obviously spent a lot of money. But Jeff Flake has, and sometimes I ask my conservative friends, what is the matter with Jeff Flake? He is fiscally and socially conservative, reliably up and down.
He's more conservative than Trump in many ways.
Yes. He absolutely. You know,
Hands down.
Puts out. You know, he is absolutely always against wasteful spending in the federal budget, and he always highlights his little pork of the week or whatever.
But I think to that point, and it highlights what Barrett said earlier, I think he would have actually survived the primary. I do believe that, but I think it would have taken a huge toll on him. That level of anger and animosity that seeped into the GOP. You're dealing with Steve Bannon now, and let's be honest, Steve Bannon is kind of a political terrorist at this point, and he's taken over the GOP primary. And he may have won that primary, but it would have been a brutal war.
It would have been a bloody,
Let's go back to the voters, because Flake didn't even break 50% when he won his seat
last
2012.
Exactly right.
That's not good. But there is a reason they don't like him, and it's immigration, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
The Gang of Eight bill. It was a gang, but they didn't like him before.
It's not just a gang. Jeff Flake was on immigration reform back in what, 03, 04?
Right, and that is definitely, when you start looking at the Arizona Republican Party, immigration is number one, number two, and number three.
But not just the Arizona Republican Party. And again, this party is becoming the party of Steve Bannon. And let's not kid ourselves. The alliances Steve Bannon has with this nationalist movement, this nativist movement, are very strong. And the candidates Steve Bannon are going to be supporting this year are based on nativism. And you look at Kelly Ward, she spouts this all the time. He would have gone after Flake relentlessly on that issue. And I just don't think Flake wanted to fight and debate that issue on those terms. I mean, I think Flake thinks also he can probably do more good on the outside than on the inside. And I'm not sure he's wrong on that count.
Also do good by doing good.
By doing good, exactly.
On the outside. Last question. Let's go back to Donald Trump, who made Jeff Flake a target. Is this all Donald Trump wants? Get Jeff Flake out of the way and then let this play out?
Oh, yeah. I don't know that he cares that much whether it's Kelly Ward or Robert Graham or Martha McSally, so long as it's not an agitator, so long as it's not someone who wants to hurt the Trump name.
And again, we all know Trump holds grudges. He doesn't let him go. He had a grudge against Jeff Flake, and he looks at this as a big win for Donald Trump.
All right. When we come back, now that Jeff Flake's out of the Republican primary, we'll tell you who's racing to fill his shoes. And what does Kirsten Sinema make of all this? Plus, a new investigative report shows Secretary of State Michelle Reagan's staff kept her in the dark as they made a monumental screw-up. And President Trump promises that his tax cuts will put a $4,000 raise in the pocket of the average American. But who exactly is the average American? We verify it. Stay with us.